Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting right here on United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We could not do it without you. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, for his contribution of his voice, his time, and his music for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on any of your streaming platforms. Also, big thank you, Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does phenomenal commission pieces of all sorts, comic books, novels, you name it, he can do it. So tonight, we are recording, actually, and I'm really hoping, Alexander, I apologize right now if I don't get this right, but Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, am I close? Close, maybe, kind of. I have one of those weird last names too that people just struggle with. And we're going to be discussing his book, Déjà Vu. Has everything already been just like that? Has everything already been? I'll tell you, I've read the book and I am, it left me with more questions, and it all made perfect sense, especially to those of us who've had a lot of déjà vu. And someone recently asked me, and maybe this is something Alexander can actually answer, because we have lived simultaneous existences and we're not the first kick of the can on this planet, obviously, there are out-of-place artifacts and locations starting to surface that have been dated hundreds, if not billions, or hundreds of billions of years. Do we have déjà vu? And when those déjà vu moments cease to be, because a lot of people say, I haven't had déjà vu in like 30 years, 20 years, 5 years. Is it because maybe we just came back at that point? Is it a continuation of our evolution? There's just a lot that goes on with that. But this is going to be more along the lines of the historical part of everything. And it's pretty mind-blowing. So without further ado, Alexander,
hello
welcome.
And welcome.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm again, I have to say, as I was saying earlier, the book is fantastic. And I think for anybody who really has questions about it, about what is déjà vu, why do we have it, this could be the thing that answers a lot of those questions. But mind you, some of them feel like riddles as well. It's just fabulous. So where I want to start, of course, is humble beginnings. We don't just fall into something this in depth. This research is fantastic. So when did you realize that something wasn't right? Let's start with, guide us in.
Yes, it is a very interesting story because it connects the just casual materialistic research when it comes to history, lost civilizations and stuff like that, but also it connects with my spiritual journey, and it is very, very interesting.
Okay.
But I will start with just materialistic history because I focus mainly on the history, on lost civilizations and stuff like that. And I've been always fascinated by the history, and especially by the ancient one. And the more ancient, the more fascinated I was.
Yes.
And actually, I was always wondering, because when we see ancient Egypt, when we see ancient Sumer or India, we see all that colors, we see all that beautiful armors and all of those monuments. And when we compare it to the modern, like casual concrete jungle of modern cities, of course, not
Yes.
all, but of many
Yes.
modern cities, I was wondering, are we really progressing as human beings, or maybe something went wrong and actually we made a regress and actually maybe we fell down a little bit? And I was wondering, is our evolution of us and of our beings just like a linear theme? Is it
Mm.
really only linear as it is presented by modern science, by modern media? Or could
Mhm.
it be that there are some ups and there are some downs? And could it be that at some point in our history, we were maybe a little bit higher than now, or at a very, very high level of development? And of
Mhm.
course, I started digging not only into history, but actually into many, many areas of science. But also, I started digging into mythologies, ancient texts, and stuff like that.
Mm.
I was really perplexed because I saw that our ancient ancestors were telling a different story about their history than it is presented in modern scientific paradigm.
Yes.
So I was really baffled, because why we are telling that our history was like that, like modern
Mm.
history presenting it, whereas our ancient ancestors were telling a different story. Where is the
Yes.
truth?
Right.
Maybe that there is, it is
Right.
somewhere in the middle. Maybe it
Yes.
isn't that our ancient ancestors were truly 100% right. But I was fascinated by that, and I wanted to check out if it can be that some of those ancient stories, legends, and myths
Mhm.
are much more than just myths and fairy tales, because
Yes.
modern science is presenting those stories, the folklore, as just some, imagination of those ancient ancestors. But I
Yes.
thought that there may be some truth in them. And even in Polish, there is like a phrasal verb or something like that, because I'm from Poland,
Yes.
about that there is always in some story or some fairy tale, there is always a grain of truth in it.
Correct.
So I was going into that. But when it comes also to my journey, right, because I wrote that book actually at 17, I needed to wait a year to publish it, because you cannot publish before being adult at 18 in Poland. So I waited
Rising.
a
Yeah.
year. Yes, yes, it was crazy. So I waited a year. Then, of course, I published it in Polish, and then a year later, at 19, I published it in English. I self-translated it. I hope that
Oh, it's fantastic.
there aren't many errors.
No, I was able to keep up, no problem.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
It is, yeah.
So I was actually interested in that topics from a very, very early age, as I
Mhm.
mentioned, from a childhood about ancient history. But then when I was in the middle high school, I actually started questioning the modern paradigm, the status quo, when it comes to the vision of our most remote history. Because
Right.
as I mentioned, I was very good at history, so I was going to some like competitions and stuff like that.
Right.
And for one competition, I needed to actually learn a history from those very, very remote eras like prehistory, Stone Age, and stuff like that, up until modern times, modern era.
Mhm.
And at that point, when I learned a lot about that, and I actually won that contest, and I could go to whatever high school I wanted.
Very
And
nice.
after that, it was during the last year of middle high school, maybe like 15 or 16, something like that. I questioned myself, is it really everything we know about history? Is it really that only things to discover are some minor details about some ruins of some ruler or some pharaoh? Or could it be that there is much more to our history? Could
Mhm.
it be that there was actually something before, like ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, and all of those
Yes.
ancient civilizations?
Yes.
And actually, I started also learning a very interesting topic that is sometimes neglected when it comes to history, of course.
Mhm.
And it was like history of science and history of the discoveries that were being made. And I saw that we knew almost nothing like 500 years ago about our history. At
Yes.
that time, like 500 years ago, we thought that we came from Adam and Eve and that first civilizations
But we were
were Greece and
conditioned to
Rome.
believe that. Yes.
Of
Right.
course, of course. But
Right.
also within the
Yes.
scientific community, it was, of
Yes.
course, only starting back then. But
Yes.
we knew almost nothing about other civilizations. It
Mhm.
wasn't until the Napoleon and his like expeditions to Egypt at the end of 18th century that we started rediscovering a new ancient Egypt. And before that, ancient Egypt was there, but we in the Western world, in the European world, or also then American world, like Western world,
Mhm.
we knew
Mhm.
nothing about Egypt. There
Right.
was some like attempts to learn about it, but these were only attempts. And we thought again that the first civilizations were ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And then it is very interesting because it wasn't until 1840s, 1840s, like it is 180 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was at that time in the 1840s that we rediscovered ancient Sumer and all of those civilizations of the Middle East. We were totally ignoring their existence, and there were plenty of mentions of Sumer, of Babylon, and all of those civilizations in many of the ancient texts. Even in the Bible, there is a mention that Abraham came from the Sumerian city of Ur. But there are also mentions when it comes to ancient historians and chroniclers. But we were totally ignoring those civilizations because we hadn't discovered them at that time. And I wondered if it like just 200 years ago, even less, like 180 years ago, we only discovered those Sumer and all of those civilizations of the Middle East. Could it be that nowadays we are in a similar situation and there are some civilizations beneath the earth that we haven't discovered yet,
Oh,
but they
astronomical.
exist? And
Yes.
what came to my mind were all of those tales of Atlantis, of Lemuria, Mu, or of
Yes.
some mythical kingdom from ancient Hindu epics. And I
Yes.
thought, why, when it comes to modern science, are we that arrogant in thinking that we know almost everything about our history, when just like a few hundred years ago, we knew almost nothing about the ancient history? And I thought that it could be the same situation with those mentions, that there were those mentions in ancient texts and chronicles. And could it be that nowadays it is a similar situation, that there are again stories of Atlantis, Mu, and other, which we take as only imagination of our ancestors, but they may be actually there. So that was my story. But I don't know if you have any questions, but I can continue because it was also connected to some like early mystical or spiritual experiences that also
Absolutely.
were going parallel with that. Because as I mentioned, it was about like at 15 or 16. Actually, it started 15, but it was going, and it was like a snowball effect. I started digging deeper, reading more about that. But at a
Yes.
similar age, I started, maybe we can call it a spiritual awakening, but it was like, I think also, like here we've got rediscoveries in history, and it was like an inner rediscovery of
I feel they go
spirituality.
hand in hand.
Yes, it was
Yes.
like a perfect timing that everything in my life happened to go in that direction, in that particular direction.
Yes.
And it was at that time also a similar time that I started, and it is connected to the Déjà Vu. That's why also synchronistically this title Déjà Vu has everything already been came to me, because I started having plenty of the Déjà Vus connected with my dreams. And you know, I was a total materialist, atheist, and at that time, you know, I was considering those stories and stuff like that, but at that time I was just like, you know, maybe there is something more, but I don't know, maybe it is only the material world, you know.
Right.
And I was like that at that time. But
Right.
then I started having experiences like dreams that were coming in the real life, like 2 or 3 days later after having that dream. And I
Right.
was, wow, what is it? And I started having more and more of those dreams that I may call prophetic dreams. It
Right.
weren't like huge events from my life or things that will change everything, like having the numbers from the lottery to win, but it were
Right.
just minor things that were really like unexplainable. These things were like had so small percentage of chance to happen that I was totally amazed about that. And I started having more and more of those dreams. And also I started remembering some dreams from a year ago or 2 years ago that also started as I reckoned that those dreams were showing me how my life would look like and what events will be in a new future. And I was really amazed by that. And also at that time when I was researching those ancient civilizations and prehistory, I started researching spirituality, mysticism and stuff like that. And it's a very interesting story because many of the skeptics are telling that that spirituality is all about belief. But in my case, it was like reverse, that I started from this point of view of materialism and atheism, and then I started rediscovering the true spirituality, that there is much more to our world than only what we see with those senses. And also because of that, I started being interested in topics like the illusion of our reality. I also found that in many ancient texts there are mentions that our reality is like an illusion of the senses, like the Hindu Maya and stuff like that, but not only in the Hindu tradition. So there were parallel to like things in my life going on, those history and science and all of those discoveries, but also the like this maybe feminine stuff, like part of my life of spirituality.
That's huge though in ancient cultures, the feminine, right?
Yes, it
and
was
manifestation of reality.
Yes, exactly. It was like those, discoveries, research, reading. It was like that masculine part. And then we had like dreams, like inner work and spirituality that was that feminine part. So it is a very interesting story. And I also remember that I had some like little spiritual, mystical maybe experiences at a very young age. But I remembered that after that things started to happen. So I remembered, wait, at a very young age, I had similar stuff because I was like seeing some energies. I was very afraid of the dark when I was like 2-3 years old. And I remember like seeing and also like hearing like psychic, like clairaudience at a very young age. And I remember I was very like afraid because, there was nothing there, but there were those like in my mind, there were
but
those.
It's there and it's there.
Yes, exactly. And all of those energies. And actually it was also at that time, like the end of the middle high school, that I really rediscovered that I have plenty of those like spiritual gifts or spiritual stuff in me. I started, I was wondering if it is real. So I just went and tried to see someone auras. And what I found out, like I was again astonished because I found out not that there are not only colors, but also some specific things in that aura. So it was very intense and it was like a shock to me that all of that happens at once. And it was, it wasn't like just some minor spiritual experience that we can neglect.
It's like a full-on awakening.
Yes.
But I mean, that's who we are. That's who we are. We come here with all of these abilities that I feel get suppressed just with everyday life, limited knowledge. People will tell you, well, it's what they put in the food. It's everything. Because as children see everything. And once you become an adult is when that changes a little bit. I've always said we are really a species with amnesia.
Yes, I think that at a very young age we are psychic and we have all of those things, like our also imagination, maybe connected to manifestation, maybe it is manifesting a lot of times. We've got all of that, but then the reality hits us. We've got here that this materialistic view of science, or we may have some like religious upbringing that is also suppressing. Yes, exactly. And I think that we are reprogramming, and then we because we are not that much conscious at a very young age. We
Yeah.
like regain like full consciousness. Of course, we had some consciousness, but we regain like full
Right.
consciousness, like awake consciousness at the age like of 5 or 4 or something like that. And then it all hits us that it is all like imagination. Everyone is telling us
Yeah.
that, and
Right.
then it is suppressed. And
Right.
there are very interesting like statistics from psychology, but also from biology, that there are about every single second 11 million of impressions and thoughts that are there every second. About like 11 million impressions and thoughts every single second that we have them. And from
Insanity.
them, our
Right.
conscious mind, the RAS, like reticular activating system or something like that, is filtering only 40 that we are conscious about. And we can actually have an experiment, and we can try to be conscious of some like little toe on
Right.
my leg, on my foot, right? So
Mhm.
then we regain that consciousness. But when I speak here, I'm not conscious about that stuff. I'm not conscious that what is behind me and stuff like that.
Right.
But every second, actually, to our body, there all of those impressions come, but we are like about 40, only 40 from that 11 million, which is less than
It feels like our
0.1%.
physical hinders us
Yes,
from
exactly.
our essence, which is like
Exactly.
energy, because your energy melts and it's always moving. It's so fast, but we're so limited here in the physical sense. Because I think people get confused, with maybe what they're hearing isn't just a thought in your head. It could be a telepathic communication. It could be this whole other dimensional stuff that's constantly happening within our time and space.
Yes, exactly. And when the focus goes, energy flows. And it was found out actually by science that those 40 impressions that are conscious depend on our belief systems and depend on all of our convictions and stuff like that. So if you believe in the material world, that there is nothing more, nothing spiritual, that we are just all like,
So
just a mistake, and
that's
nothing
your
has any
existence.
meaning.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Then those 40 like impressions that you are conscious of every second are like that. And if you go year by year in that programming, you are just conscious of those stuff. So then when you actually allow yourself to go for that bigger picture, to allow that maybe there is something more, then you can reprogram yourself, and then you can start experiencing all of those things. So I'm against that materialistic agenda of modern science, and that's why I started questioning a lot. And I think that there is much more to everything. And you also mentioned that you have plenty of questions after reading my book, but I am not here to give everyone all of the answers, because I also do not know them.
No,
But
it's still part of your journey, but you did really,
Yes.
really, really well. There's a part in chapter 1 where you talk about natural disasters and dreams of Armageddons. There's a theory, and you can let me know, what your thoughts are on extraterrestrial civilizations. But there's a theory through research for people in the field of ufology, that people who have been abducted by extraterrestrials, or I hate the word abduction, who contactees or experiencers tend to have apocalyptic dreams, and they all describe the same thing. So is this a massive deja vu on a bigger scale? And maybe it's because extraterrestrials are known, people who have had contact allegedly will come back more gifted or more open, or maybe they're taught to just remember. So what are your thoughts on that?
It may also be, I am thinking from my own perspective, because I am really into dreams. I actually have from that, like when I was 15 or 16, I started writing them down. I have like that amount of notebooks of my dreams.
Right.
I think that it may also symbolize something, that it may not be an actual disaster, but it may symbolize that the current paradigm of those people was totally shattered, that everything they believed in was actually destroyed, like the apocalypse, everything is destroyed. But also, I don't remember, but the word apocalypse actually like means something that also revelatory will happen,
Yes,
that the
correct.
end is a new beginning. So it
Yes.
may be like our subconscious telling us that all of those like previous beliefs were shattered, and then when we shatter those beliefs, those like about the material world, that there is nothing more, then we have other impressions that we are conscious of, all of those things, we allow all of those like extrasensory things to happen. And that's why we may have people may have, after those contacts, may have like more extrasensory perception and more like spiritual gifts. But no, it is like my little theory, but it may
No,
also
it's
be
a good theory, because dream interpretation will tell you even death, if you dream of death, really symbolizes it's a new beginning, realistically. You're just shutting
yes.
the door and opening another door to something
Yes.
that's new, right?
Yes, it all depends on the dream, because I've
Yes.
experienced many dreams. I do not have an entire theory of dreams, but
Yes.
I may say that there are some different dreams. There are some different types of dreams, and like those prophetic dreams are totally different. The surroundings are different, and like
Yes.
this dream feels different than like a normal subconscious dream, because we have like subconscious dreams of those things that happen and all of those things that our subconscious needs to memorize. There are also those dreams, like not every dream is prophetic and not every dream is
Well,
spiritual, but it all
absolutely.
depends on the dream. So I don't know, because I wasn't that interested in that topic. I
I mean,
don't know
that's
what
sort of
was
it.
that,
Yeah.
what were those dreams of those
Well, what about
contactees.
like a dimensional bleed through? Because there's a belief that our essence can actually split and exist simultaneously in other dimensions. Could we just be experiencing like the ancient world, for example? Could it be happening dimensionally as we speak right now? Can we slip back and forth? Do we travel when we sleep? Are we just having remnants of maybe part of our essence?
Yes, it is very interesting, and I think that it can be answered by understanding the concept, the idea of dimensions, actually.
Right.
Because, the
Yes.
first dimension is like a single line, like the
Mhm.
timeline of history, right? So if it was
Mhm.
a line, like this is like a line, so it
Mhm.
is, one dimension. The second dimension is a square. So we've got like a plane. This is a second dimension.
Mhm.
And a third dimension is, of course, this depth that we experience on our everyday basis. But
Mhm.
now think of those dimensions. If we had two dimensions, and if we had some entities on that plane,
Mhm.
but there were more dimensions, and those entities would be like, there would be two on those piece of paper, but
Yes.
they will be like connected to each other if it was three-dimensional.
Mhm.
If it was a plane, it would be two entities on that plane on the
Mhm.
second dimension, but on the third it would be one entity. So it
Mhm.
may be the same with our world, that
Mhm.
we here in third dimension are like many different people, but
Yes.
at the essence, at some higher dimensions, it is all one, like all
Yeah,
of
try
those
to think of it like
mythologies.
radio frequencies, like you can only
Hmm.
listen to one radio frequency or station at a
Hmm.
time, because, I mean, I hear different frequencies all the time. Do you find yourself, because I find when you do awaken, you do hear different
Hmm.
levels of
Yes.
frequencies and vibrations, because as Nikola Tesla said, it's all about frequency, vibration, mathematics. It's complex, but it's actually pretty simple,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. Some people believe we just sit with multiple dimensions, like we're
Hmm.
within one space, just different time and obviously different time.
Hmm.
But okay, so let's continue from your point then.
Yes. So as I mentioned, Probably there are more dimensions. Even physics is telling
Who
us that there
knows?
may be up to like 11, 16 dimensions in the string theory.
Mm,
So it isn't like only the spiritual stuff. It may even be logically considered that we are like simultaneously in multiple places at once, because as I mentioned, in
mhm.
a plane, on a plane, right, on the ground, we can have two things, but there may be like I'm standing on this ground and there are like two legs, but it is all me, all one. So it may be also when it comes to us, when it comes to our three-dimensional reality, that in the fifth dimension,
Mhm.
actually like me and some other like essence of me living somewhere else
Yes,
is
right.
actually the one and the same self, and maybe up to above that entire
Yes,
humanity is a collective. There
right.
were some parapsychological studies that confirmed that like the collective events, like some disasters like 9/11 and stuff like that, were influencing the RNGs, random number generators. And
Mhm.
those random number generators, so it generates ones and zero in a totally random like number, and when it
Mhm.
comes to like lots of those numbers, it is 50-50 ones and zeros. Those
Right.
random number generators were established in many places on our planet, and they
Mhm.
were like every day going about 50-50. But then when it came to some like events like 9/11 or some even happy events on the entire world,
Mhm.
those random number generators like started generating more ones than zeros, and it
Right.
was a significant number compared to like normal everyday life, like previous days, previous weeks, or even months.
Mhm.
So it may be that even with that like empirical evidence, we
Mhm.
may confirm in the future that there is something like a collective and everything is on some level one. And also when it comes to like living simultaneously in a few places, we have,
Mhm.
for instance, Dr. Michael Newton, and he was like hypnotically asking people about
Mhm.
their previous lives or about their current lives, about reincarnation and stuff like that. And those people, under deep hypnosis, were telling him, from many patients actually,
Mhm.
it was seen that we are living in multiple like lives at the same time, that our
Yes.
essence is divided into few lives, because if we
Yes.
had all of that essence in one life, we would be like too OP, we would be like gods, and we would
Right.
be
And split us
too,
up and
too
just keep us
powerful.
sort of like this instead of like this. Yeah.
Yes, humanity is not ready for that
No,
yet.
no, absolutely. I definitely believe that, I mean, the collective consciousness, I've tested that theory just in a very simple way.
Hmm.
On a few occasions, I'll use a very random word, like something that never gets used. One of the ones I used was like swell. Oh, that's swell. Because it's a term they used to say in the 50s. Like the generation right now, we don't go around saying, oh, that's really swell. Like we don't, we just don't say things like that. I mean, younger people now just be like, what is that? Like on an average, they'll have their own terminology that they use, in this era. And within about, honestly, within a few days, I started seeing that word pop up often, whether it would be on, if I'm reading. I don't get on social media often, but I do like to read the streams and catch up on some of friends and family. And then I just started seeing things like swell or even something like groovy, like something really obscure. And it
Hmm.
just started showing up. Or, it's like
Hmm.
sometimes you just think of something and then there it is.
Hmm.
It just starts coming
Yes,
up. I
yes.
haven't seen this movie in, 20 years. All of a sudden you start seeing little clips of, or people talking about it. It's just, I do believe that somehow we are collective because we are
Hmm.
energy and what we put out there. That's why they say you have to be careful what you put out there. Words are spells. Spell
Hmm.
casting, words are spells. You have to be very careful. So, if you're going to put out a bunch of negative stuff all the time, and that's what's going to come back to you. Is that
Hmm.
because of the collective? So,
Yes, I. Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yes, I think that it is all about energy. Like as
Yes.
you mentioned, that we can have negative energy, we can have positive.
Yes.
Once I had like a semi-mystical experience, and it was
Mhm.
about that. I was actually going through a forest. It was like late autumn, so there were plenty of leaves falling down. And I saw, because there were some people like walking
Mhm.
around in this forest, and I saw like those leaves that were falling were actually behaving depending on the energy of the person at that time. Like I saw plenty of energies about persons, right, around persons, and I saw that those leaves actually like curve themselves around those energies. And it
Mhm.
wasn't only about the people, because I especially when I was very young, I was seeing different energies like floating just. And I saw in that forest that there were also like some orbs and some bulbs of energies, and those leaves were also
Mhm.
falling differently, like curving around them, or sometimes like going, like being magnetically attracted to them. And
Mhm.
I actually think, in my opinion, that this is how the law of attraction and manifestation works. I think that there are plenty of gurus of manifestation that are just, telling because they learned something in book or
Mhm.
tried, but do not have the exact like
Formula.
experience. Yes,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
are just saying because they want to be gurus. There are some
Yes.
people like that, or they have even belief system that is false because they want to believe in that law of attraction. I find plenty of people like that, but I think that the law of attraction is about the vibration, about different
Yes.
energies attracting each other. It
Yes.
isn't only about the like also attraction between people. It isn't only about the looks, the physical stuff, or the even mental stuff, but it is about the energy. And the
Mm.
same with other stuff. And I
Mhm.
think that depending on our, let's say, frequency of our aura and stuff like that, it is all either attracting things like that or like pushing
Mhm.
away other things. And
Mhm.
I also think, because I was very into also like mind, like but also the energies, because I'm very not only intuitive, but I would say sensitive.
Yes.
And I had plenty of also bad things because of that sensitivity, because maybe sometimes I was too sensitive, like too feminine as a man.
Yes.
And but I often feel energy like in my body, like different stuff. And it isn't because I was also very into like human anatomy, like working out
Yes.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I can differentiate between what is about my muscles or my internal organs and stuff like that, and what is about the energy inside my body. And
Mhm.
I've experienced that depending on my thoughts, that depending on my all of that stuff that is going from my mind, different energies appear or disappear in my body, or are moving actually. Like
Mhm.
if I have stubborn thoughts, I feel really stubborn also on the inside. And then it is, I want to take action, but I'm too stubborn, too much into like that stubborn or sometimes maybe lazy
Right.
energy. And I
Right.
feel it. And it
Right.
also corresponds to the chakras. And I
Yes.
saw that depending on my like thoughts, on my ideas, on my like all of that stuff that goes from my mind,
Mhm.
different chakras are like resonating,
Yes.
and I experienced that many times. So I think it is about the frequency, and it is connected to energy, that energies have different frequencies,
Right.
and some are high vibrational, so we have plenty of energy. That's why when
Mhm.
we are like on positive like vibes or high frequencies,
Yes.
let's say
Yes.
even like those scales like Hawkins scale and stuff like that,
Mhm.
we may feel more energetic like at a body level.
I
And
agree.
I was also into like nutrition and stuff like that, and I thought that maybe sometimes I have low energy because I didn't sleep well, or I didn't eat well, but actually it depended on my frequency. And
Right.
sometimes I can like supercharge myself, or in the reverse, like
Mhm.
like had all of my energies sucked out. So
Right.
it is about the
Right.
energies and
Well, sometimes people
frequencies.
can do that to you as well
Mm-hmm.
without realizing. Life is busy and people have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different traumas or stress, and you don't realize how you can. I mean, it's natural to see positive energy and gravitate towards it and try to grab onto it. And people have no idea that they can do that to other people. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why, especially if you're in a crowd of people as well,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to ground yourself.
Yes, in a crowded place, I actually sometimes feel those different energies. And you have to be really strong, like grounded, as you mentioned, in
Yes.
yourself, not to be like taken by those energies. And sometimes, like, you feel inspiration, but why you feel like so inspired? Either
Hmm.
because something resonates with you, or that
Hmm.
person that inspires you, like a motivational speaker sometimes can motivate us.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
because this person is at a higher frequency, and
Yes.
we are coming to that, like
You
in physics.
gravitate towards
Oh
that,
yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, like in physics, depending
Yes.
on the mass, on the amount of mass, the
Hmm.
gravity is stronger. So it
Hmm.
is the same with, I think, with energies and with those frequencies. And
Hmm.
it is also connected. I don't know if you are into like some reality transurfing and some theories like that. I've
Hmm.
read some of them, and there are some even like in the very old esoteric like books and knowledge. There
Hmm.
are some, like in the, I don't know, in the Christian concept, we've got like some demons that suck our energy, and
Yes.
we have also other concepts. But there is this universal concept in esoterics about being taken by foreign energies. Like,
Yes.
in the Christianity, that the devil is speaking, that you've got the devil and the angel,
Yes.
and
That's
who you
right.
gravitate
That's
towards.
right.
And there are plenty. There are like sometimes this is called pendulum, like that there are pendulums outside of you, and you can get into that pendulum, and then you are swinging like that pendulum, not
That's
like
right.
you want to swing, and not like you want to have your life, but
Right.
like that pendulum wants, like
Right.
that energy wants. And
That's
you
right.
can be deceived, like deceived by some guru, fake
Hmm.
guru. You can be this and taken into that life. You can be deceived by some shiny objects. You can be deceived by some political figure and stuff like that. And then you are not living according to your essence, your
You're
energy,
not.
but
No.
you are living someone else's life. And
That's
what
right.
you're doing, you are giving them your energy,
That's
because
right.
your potential is not fulfilled. So then you're giving that like energy this other person.
That's
And I
right.
think that it may be behind the reincarnation stuff. I don't believe it is always like
Yeah.
negative, that
No.
you did wrong, so you have to be punished and be like a slave in
Well, I think
another
sometimes it's
reincarnation.
by choice too, though. I mean, look
Yes,
at
of
Edgar
course.
Casey. He
Mm-hmm.
that's what he specialized in healing
Mm-hmm.
people through going back
Yes,
through their past
exactly.
lives. I do agree with that completely. I believe the ancient people were well aware of that as well, and dealing with
Mm-hmm.
alchemy and any of the esoteric stuff, and going into the ancient mystery schools and things like that. Just really taking the abilities that they
Mm-hmm.
knew they had and just elevating them and
Mm-hmm.
constantly evolving them. And I think that's part of where oral history came in as well. Don't write
Mm-hmm.
anything down. Always just keep it, keep orating it. And that included a lot of this knowledge. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a line that dies off, or you just have another generation that says, oh, those are just old tales because they're not taught to respect the oral history, then it's gone. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
find all that information, like, on petroglyphs or hieroglyphs or anything like that. That information just disappears. It's so
Mm-hmm.
important to try and, you know, evolve yourself to that point where you can retain all of that on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but also actually finishing about
Yes.
reincarnation,
Yeah.
I think that sometimes it may be, as you mentioned, maybe voluntary, but maybe like semi-voluntary, because maybe you didn't fulfill your potential. You wanted
Yes.
that life to be in some way, but You
Your
were
evolution was
distracted.
hindered somewhere.
Yes, you
Yes.
were distracted. You went into that life of some other people, like of
Mhm.
that ideal from social media or something like
Yeah.
that, or of some
Mhm.
political figure or some other guru or celebrity. And that's why you may need to reincarnate again to fulfill actually like a very strong part that your soul truly
Mhm.
desire. I
Right.
think that it may be the case. And that may be when it comes to the deja vu.
Right.
And in the in the almost last chapter, I think, of my book, I provide a really interesting case about repeating history. This case was initially found by David Wilcock, also
Yeah.
a great researcher and
Yeah,
author.
I love him. Yeah.
Yes, and David Wilcock found, but also after some other researchers and astrologers, it wasn't his like
Right.
discovery, but he elaborated on it. There is a case of repeating of history that was repeated
Yes.
during a zodiacal cycle of 2,160 years, because there are zodiacal eras, because our Earth is moving through the galaxy, and also there's a special like different orbit of our planet, because our planet not only is like turning around and not only like orbiting around our sun, but also have a special movement, and
Mhm.
that movement leads to having different zodiacal epochs, zodiacal ages.
Mhm.
And because of that, every 2160 years we've got another zodiacal sign on the horizon. Like 2000 years ago, we had Pisces, and that's why Jesus was associated with fish. It may be, it may not, but I think that it
Yes.
may be because of
I
that.
agree.
And now we are speaking about the age of Aquarius.
That's right.
So every about 2160 years, there is a different zodiacal age. And it was very well known to our ancient ancestors. They knew about the precession of the equinoxes and different zodiacal eras.
Mhm.
And it is a case that during the previous cycle, exactly 2160 years plus minus a few months, not even a year, and this is very amazing. Some events, and those events are spanning through like 50 or 60 years even, and
Mhm.
all of them happened 2160 years later. The history actually repeated. The same like people led the same wars, the same like countries were invaded, and the same like it all happened in the same
It's a
way.
vicious cycle,
Exactly, but
essentially. Yeah.
in a different situation, because back then
Yes.
2000 years ago it was ancient Rome, it were Punic wars, and
Mhm.
now we had like USA and its militaristic and like globalistic ambitions to rule the
Mhm.
world,
Mhm.
and even the battles, like the wars
Mhm.
that were started,
To the
all of
last
those
century.
things
Yeah.
happened. Exactly. It's a
Right.
very
Right.
interesting case. I won't elaborate on it here because it is
Yes.
very complex, as you may know,
Yeah. Oh,
but
just get us booted off YouTube.
yes, but it shows us
Right.
that the history repeats itself,
It
and
does.
similar people, similar events, and it may
Yes.
be that there was some potential, like ancient Romans maybe didn't fulfill it, like maybe went too much too aggressive
Mhm.
or too negative or something like that, and those people needed similar situation, like also an empire,
So
like the
they come
USA at
back
that
and
time.
they
Yeah.
repeat it to finish
Mhm.
their own.
Yes, exactly. So
That
the
just
situations are different, but
yes.
the ideas, the potential is very the same, and it depends on our own actions, like karma, what will happen, and if we will be still in that cycle and we'll be repeating it and repeating, or maybe we will just go out from that cycle.
But I think, yeah, I mean, history, we're talking like throughout thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, just keeps repeating itself. I do believe everything is affiliated with the zodiac. Even just look at the
Mm-hmm.
time of the age of Taurus when you went through, with the
Mm-hmm.
Egyptians doing bull worshiping, for example. The ancient Greeks, same idea.
Yes.
Like I can understand that because
Mm-hmm.
most ancient people watched the stars. So they
Yes.
had that association. They were connected to everything.
Mm-hmm.
They were connected to the planet. They were connected, to the stars, the heavens, like everything. They built their monuments and they celebrated, for example, the solstices and the equinoxes. Like all of that was
Mm-hmm.
all a very real part of who they were. And if you follow Micah Danks at all, who's been on our show a few times, he basically can translate any of the ancient texts and bring out all of the zodiac. He goes, everything is all in there. And it was just a matter, metaphorically speaking, but this is what this meant. This is what this meant. And when you look at it that way, you're like, God, that makes so much sense, But why do you think, I mean, aside from, let's say, karmic or, evolution of individuals who keep coming back, when you're looking at war, for example, that's on a massive scale, you have leaders from, let's say, all different parts of the world. So if we're using, for example, the ancient Romans come back and maybe perhaps didn't fulfill this part of it, it's like these people would have to come back as just like ending up in all different parts of the world. And it's a huge undertaking, I guess is where I'm going with it, to bring this back and try to push forward as a recreation. That's a really big thing. It goes to show you, do we go back to that collectiveness?
Yes, I think it is about those energies. Like you do not reincarnate whenever you want, but it is chosen by like divine timing.
Yes.
No, we cannot have everything right now, but everything will happen at the right time, and you will see that it was good to you that it didn't happen a year ago, because nowadays everything clicks and all of different events from your life click. And I think that it is the same with those cycles, that there are different energies, and those energies resonate with different things, and those things happen as we mentioned with this law of attraction and how it all manifests. So I think it is like that. And then we have some challenges. Will we make the same mistakes as previously, or will we move forward? And I think it is the same with like every empire. We have falls and downs of the empires and stuff like that. That it is, we have cyclically like that negative karma. Let's say there will be negative events. All of those events will hit us at some time, but it depends on our own reaction, on our own action, if those events will be keeping us in that karmic cycle of negativity, or will we break from that cycle. And I think it is like that, because when it comes to that history that repeated, we had panic wars in the ancient times, and then we had other wars, battles, and then even World War II during the modern times. So some decisions were made wrong again. So it depends on us, because we can prevent wars, we can prevent like negative stuff, we can prevent genocides, and it depends on our own actions. Will we have the ego to go and fight and conquer the world, or will we like have some positive reaction to that?
Well, it's all about evolving. So somewhere along the line, that positive has to kick in, or we just keep going. Let's talk about Atlantis and ancient, Lemuria and Mu. Where do you think Atlantis was? I know there's a lot of theories with that. I've been to Santorini. I have spent time there in ancient Thera. I've climbed down into the mouth of a live volcano and tried to just like, okay, this is it, try to pick up that intuitive feeling. I also really believe in Freddie Silva. He's been on the show a couple of times. I believe in his theory as well, that it's in the Azores off the coast of Portugal. I mean, there's a pretty big pyramid there. There's there's a new theories coming up with Antarctica. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that it wasn't like Santorini and Thera, because then we have to, because Plato described in his two dialogues, Critias and Timaeus, some information about Atlantis. That
the eye of the Sahara.
Yes, I will come to that. But he provided us with some information. And Plato wasn't just a storyteller. He was clearly describing like ancient myths from Egypt. In other dialogues, he's talking about the god of wisdom Thoth, and he's presenting accurate information from ancient Egyptians. And according to Plato, according to Critias and Timaeus, in which he describes Atlantis, but also the cosmology of the entire world in Timaeus, but he mentions that it was Solon, a Greek lawmaker who was a really, really like high value person. He wasn't like some like fraud or some fake guru. And it is mentioned that Solon went to Egypt and the priests of Sais told him about the Atlantis, these lost civilizations. They told him that Greeks are not that old, that
Right.
Egyptian civilization is much older. And even
Yes.
that
Yes.
statement is correct when we see
Yes.
like lists of kings, like Manetho's kings list,
Yes.
Turin's canon, like the Palermo stone. And it's
Right.
very interesting because we have like plenty of different sources of ancient Egyptian chronology, and all of those
Yes.
sources are telling us that history of Egypt is much older, and they're telling us similar things about
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
kings and rulers.
Yeah.
And modern history cuts off everyone before Menes-Name, the
Mhm.
alleged first pharaoh, because before there was nothing, there were just small states. It's
Yes.
very interesting because the same idea is in India. We have plenty of different stories of Mahabharata that
Yeah.
was very, very long time ago, Ramayana, or even like some Tamil epics, or even in Mesopotamia, we've got like the Sumerian kings list that are telling us that the history is much older.
Just look
So
at the Epic
why?
of Gilgamesh. That just tells you
Yeah,
so much
but
right
you know,
there.
Gilgamesh may
Gobekli
be in
Tepe.
chronological
Yeah.
during the chronological times, but we have mentions of
Yeah.
some rulers like 200,000 years ago, and we think
More.
that we know everything,
Yeah.
while our ancient ancestors are telling us a different story. And I will come to that later, but
Yeah. Yeah.
even that statement by Plato that the Egyptian civilization is much older is correct, with plenty of evidence and plenty of actually good evidence, not just like
Yes. No.
some apocrypha or stuff like
No,
that.
that's right. Yeah.
But so this was the statement, and those priests told Solon that there was civilization of Atlantis, that it was having fights in the Mediterranean, that they were having influence over Egypt and over the modern Italy and all of those
Mhm.
lands. And they told him that, of course, this civilization was destroyed during a single night and day during a catastrophe.
Right.
But it was also told that this civilization was beyond the Hercules pillars or
That's right.
Heracles pillars.
Yeah.
So it is
Yes.
modern Gibraltar. So we
Yes.
have two information here. The date 9,000 years before Solon, so about 9,600 years BC. But we have also a location beyond Gibraltar, somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean. And when
Mhm.
it comes to the Santorini theory, we have to take 1 0 from 9,000 to 900,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we have to take like reverse the location not beyond Hercules pillars but inside the Mediterranean. So I
Yes.
do not take that
It's yeah.
this is not a scientific approach at all.
No.
We cannot
No.
like eliminate all of that information. And
They've got it all over the place. They've got it in the
yes.
Atlantic Ocean, just past the Bimini Wall,
Mm-hmm.
past Bermuda Triangle,
Mm-hmm.
to which apparently there's some pyramid there as
Yes.
well, right? So I don't know. I mean, I look at it's tough because it's like no ancient Lemurians and they connect
Mm-hmm.
all of that as well. But I mean, I see them in South America somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't see. Atlantis, I don't know. The Eye of the Sahara is I mean, when they describe everything,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty accurate. But again, you have your naysayers that like it cannot possibly be. It's just it should be
Mm-hmm.
northwest more.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Uh-huh. It may be that, the Atlantis was a civilization, and it would be more correct with like a psychic statement of Edgar Casey and other sources. We have some
Yes.
psychic sources
Yes.
that it was a civilization, and maybe the Eye of the Saqqara, which has also those concentric rings that are similar to Plato's
Yes.
description, even when it comes to the
Yes.
diameter. It may
Yes.
be that it was just a single city of Atlantis, and another city was nearby the Azores, or
Yeah.
maybe one nearby
So
the
several
Bimini.
cities.
Yes, exactly. It may be, but
See, that would
all of
make sense to me. That would
Mhm.
make sense to me also.
all of those locations would be correct with Plato and would be correct with the date also, not only the location.
Right.
Because when we think of the Eye of the Saqqara, it is like nearby that,
It is.
the Gibraltar. But it may be that, you go through the Gibraltar into the open ocean, and then you go through the coast
Go
of
down.
Africa and you
Yeah.
go down. So it may also be like that. When
Right.
it comes to the Azores, there is also a theory of nearby, because nearby Azores there is, I don't know how it is in English, because I was learning
Yeah.
geography in Polish, but it is like there are two tectonic plates, and
Yes.
one is being like subdued beneath the other. So it may be that if the Atlantis according to Plato was a very mountainous region,
That's
one
right.
of the highest regions in the world. So if it was like mountainous, it may be that it was like on the edge of those plates,
Yes.
and those plates hit each other and then made like some mountainous island
Yes.
of Atlantis. And then it may be that that island was subdued beneath, and that could lead to those like single day and night of cataclysm. It
Mhm.
may have led to that, because those events are sometimes very, very rapid. Or
Oh,
it may be
absolutely.
exaggeration. Maybe the Atlantis sank in like a few days or a few months, something like that.
I think everything, there's so much that's pre-ice age that
Mm-hmm.
disappeared beneath the waves rather
Yes.
rapidly. I mean, if you look in North America, they found a Stonehenge in one of the Great Lakes of Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So there's tunnels apparently all over, like, on this planet, which basically show they go from the different various continents.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody built these things, and they believe a lot of the ancient people would travel through. And when I say tunnels, I mean think immense, like
Mm-hmm.
huge underground tunnels. That you could fit like a 747 through, like huge. It'd be a huge undertaking. They have photos of
Mm-hmm.
these things, and and right now, I guess archaeologists and science is trying to look at this and say, how is this possible? But the continents connect.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a curiosity to me. That to me
Yes.
just gets my brain going, because it
Yes.
sure would connect a lot of dots, wouldn't it?
Yes, it's not only about the connection of those underground tunnels, but also about the idea of ley lines. We have
Ley line.
some megalithic or sites or pyramids or even
Yes.
temples around the world
Yes.
that are connected to each other by
Yes.
the latitude and longitude.
That's
Of
right.
course, we do not have like an entire megalithic like grid, because we have plenty of oceans and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
many of the places are really connected by those ley lines. I do not
Mhm.
remember, of course, all of the latitudes and longitudes, but there are plenty of stuff. And even in the 19th century, there was Charles Piazzi Smith who investigated the Great Pyramid, and he proposed that the prime meridian should not go through Greenwich like it is today, like the
Mhm.
0
Right.
degrees, but it
Right.
should go through the Great Pyramid of Giza, because then plenty of ancient cities, and of course modern cities were built on the ancient ones, would be on very nice, like numerically speaking, locations like 20, 13, 15, and not like 38.6 point,
Right.
what I mean.
Huh.
So he proposed that, and he actually found out that the Great Pyramids is located in the center of the landmass of the Earth. And there are some more recent discoveries, like we can use computers and stuff like that,
Yes.
that are pointing that it is not the Great Pyramid at the center of the Earth landmass. And it means that if we get like lines like
Mhm.
plus all over the world that connect all over the world, like those
Mhm.
lines, like those
That's
ley
right.
lines, and
Yeah.
Thor at cross, like from those corners of the pyramid, those lines would actually go through the biggest landmass that is possible on our planet. And I think that it is still the case, because I researched the newer ones that were taking that to Turkey, but they used a different technique, modern technique, that was seeing land not from those 8 corners of the pyramid, because we
Right.
know that the pyramid isn't like a square, but it has some concave, it has like some concavity in it.
Yes.
But I think that it is still the case, because they used like circles around Turkey to provide that there is the biggest landmass. But the pyramid, we see the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, as just square base. But actually during the I think it is spring equinox, we can
Yes.
see that it has not 4 sides but 8 sides. And is it a
Mm,
coincidence that Charles Piazza Smith proposed that this landmass is by connecting 8 lines? And I think that he
it's
didn't know
fascinating.
that at that time that it has like 8 sides, not 4. So it
Wow.
is a very interesting. And I
It
also
is.
research. I will write about it in my later books or some blogs or stuff like that about the ancient and prehistoric measures of the Earth, because in the Great Pyramid there are encoded dimensions of the Earth, and even in the meteorological systems of ancient
Yes.
people there
Yes.
are those dimensions. So it is a really vast knowledge
Well,
that connects geography and astronomy.
I think I agree. I agree with you. I think you have to love all this stuff because it's what our entire existence is made up of. I believe that the ancients knew where all of these places crossed. I believe that's why they built ancient monuments in all of these places, and the church came along and built over top of these
Hmm.
monuments. This is, you know, that's what
Hmm.
conquerors do eventually, or the next generation of people come in and they evolve on top of that.
Hmm.
I know they just found they did some deforestation in Brazil, I believe it is, and they
Hmm.
just found a whole bunch more monoliths.
Yes,
So
yes.
I love that the Earth is giving up her secrets, and that with technology we are finding more and more of these amazing places because
Hmm.
in knowing that the ancient people built over top of these places, these power spots, where I do believe you can cross dimensionally or interdimensionally,
Hmm.
um, I think then will help, we as this generation explore more about
Hmm.
our past and where these places are and what these people were about.
Hmm. Yes, and when it comes to, like you mentioned, that at those places there may be some like portals and stuff
Yes,
like that,
agreed.
it may also be
Stargates and stuff.
connected
Yes,
to the interior of our planet,
yes,
because there are some theories that go back to like USSR and Russian scientists
yes,
about the crystal interior of our planet, and they
yes,
actually connected the idea of those megalithic connections of those ley lines, or
yes.
Lung Mei as they were called, the dragon paths in China. They
Hmm.
connected that with the idea that the Earth's core isn't like a ball, but it is actually like
Crystal.
a crystal
They call it the
dodecahedron,
Great Crystal.
icosahedron.
Yes.
Yes, and it is very interesting. I think I described it in chapter like 7, 8, or 9, something like that, by the like 3/4 of my book, that
Right.
even Plato in one of his dialogues, Phaedrus, is telling us that the Earth, where we zoom out and see it from above, is like a 12-sided ball, and 12-sided ball is known as a platonic solid dodecahedron. There are 12 pentagons on each side. It
Yes.
is one of those platonic solids that each side has the same like length, and it is the same like 12 exact pentagons into a ball, like
Wow.
that, like
Yes.
tetrahedron. So even Plato is telling us that. And so how he knows that? Maybe
Right.
he had some spiritual connection with that, or maybe he had some ancient information about those lines and about the Earth's grid. And it
Right.
may sound like just like a fictitious theory, like science fiction, but actually we have some evidence that some of the bodies in our solar system, like planets or even moons
Hmm.
of planets, are based on the platonic solids. And the platonic solids, as I mentioned, is like tetrahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, those like polyhedra that have the same, like the same side. Like the side is from triangles, and all of those triangles are exact the same, and it's like a figure, a
Hmm.
three-dimensional figure. And there are some evidence that some moons have some like polyhedra inside of them, like tetrahedra or stuff like that. And
Hmm.
even I think it was Jupiter. We know by the winds on the Jupiter, because it is gaseous planet, so we see those like gases that are moving. We may assume that the interior of Jupiter isn't like some ball, or there is no like
Hmm.
interior, only gas, but it may be that the interior is a crystal in, I think, like hexagonal
Yes.
shape. I describe
Yeah.
it in book. I don't remember everything right now, all of those,
No, it's hard.
mathematical
It's
stuff.
information overload. I know.
Yes, yes, it
I
was long
know.
ago. But
Right.
if we have some evidence that some bodies in our solar system are based on like geometrical figures, why
Why would
not
it
our
not be like
planet,
that for us? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it may be why in some places, like in some temples located on those ley lines or in the pyramids, we have some
Mhm.
frequencies. Like as you mentioned, Freddy Silva in one of his books or in a few of his books mentioned that temples, when we see how they are tuned to some specific frequencies that
Exactly.
enable us to lower our brain frequencies and achieve like more mystical experiences, because
Mhm.
the deeper we are in the brain waves, the more like mystical, the more
Mhm.
subconscious we become. So
Mhm.
it may be that it was all on purpose, and it may be this not only acoustically designed, but also it is about like this crystal inside of our planet. And
Mhm.
the points of that crystal, if it was like a giant triangle,
Mhm.
on the points there would be some gravitational anomalies, and the
Mhm.
gravity, magnetism, and stuff like that would be different than on the side, because
Mhm.
those corners would be much higher up than the side. So it may be because of that, and it may be that some like places like Alaska, the Alaskan Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, are on some like specific
Mhm.
locations that are connected to this crystal interior of our planet.
I agree with you 100%. And I probably have all of Freddie's books. He's, like I said, he's been on the show a couple times. He's brilliant and he's a very good researcher.
Yes.
So when he puts something out there, it's like, yeah, see, I'm with Freddie on that. but
Mm-hmm.
but I also believe that, again, our ancient people knew this, but I don't think people understand just how far back civilization on this planet goes.
Mm-hmm.
There have been mines and locations found throughout the world, out of place artifacts that go back like 300 million plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the mines that have been found are very, very sophisticated, and there's just no way. There's just no way that for us to now try to dismiss a lot of this due to conditioning or due to the fact that maybe they're finding the powers that be, academia, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
maybe finding advanced technology that, obviously is on a need to know basis and they don't feel the common public needs to know. I find that, things are surfacing and we're just not meant
Yes.
to know it. And we may never know it.
Mm-hmm.
But people are finding, like, I mean, there's a lot of really smart people out there. People are finding these portals. People are finding, they're visiting these ancient places, and do I believe that portals are taking you, to, let's say, a middle or inner earth, getting you closer to that crystal? I don't know. It's a theory. Everything is just a, hypothesis at this point, unless you have the ability to get there. But there are people who have just traveled and come back. I mean, I know two people who walk around their house and they hear their family. There's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea where they
Yes.
are. They have missing time. They counterclock back around their house. Their family's like, "You've been gone for 2 hours." Meanwhile, it's like, "I've been gone for 5 minutes." He could hear their family, but they're in this time and space, they're just
Mm-hmm.
gone. So there's definitely something going on. And I absolutely believe that ley lines, which are nicknamed Highway of the Dead, which a lot of people don't know either in the paranormal world, because energy can just swoop on, hitch a ride, and just go. It's
Mm-hmm.
believed that, extraterrestrial crafts do the same thing. They just
Yes.
travel right through these lines.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think it's so hard for people to just look at the obvious, see it? We live in an amazing planet, an amazing place. We come here with amazing abilities, and yet we're just like a hamster on a wheel. Like you say, we just can't seem to evolve
Mm-hmm.
ourselves I mean, if we're 100 years, our governments and militaries are probably a good 100 years ahead with technology. But on an average, we as a species should be way further ahead than where we are
Mm-hmm.
in every aspect of everything you've discussed.
Yes, our modern cars, despite all those electric or hydrogen, but
Mm.
our cars, our trains and stuff like that is mostly based on the cars that were 100 years ago. But when
Yeah.
it comes to other areas of technology like smartphones or even PCs, all of that is like on a much higher level. And it is, like a conspiracy theories. It
Well,
is
it's also
something's wrong
tracking.
here.
If you want to track your people, this is the best way to track them and keep
Mm-hmm.
track of all personal information. It's genius if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
but let's go back to the book of Enoch,
Mm-hmm.
where he said the angels showed him literally everything within the palm of their hand. Like it would look like
Mm-hmm.
this to me.
Yes, exactly. It's very interesting. I think that Enoch is the same person as Thoth and the same person as Hermes of the Greeks.
Right.
Because when it comes to Thoth, he is also mentioned to be like the scribe of the gods. And Enoch was the scribe, he was taken
Like
to heaven.
Metatron. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But also, Enoch learned about astronomy. He learned
Yes.
about different stuff.
Yes.
It was like a man of knowledge. And who was Thoth? Thoth was god of wisdom, and he was to introduce all of the sciences, early sciences, to ancient Egypt. There are plenty of connections between two of those people. Also, there is a connection to another god, Cadmus. It may be that it is the same person like Enoch, Thoth, Hermes, and Cadmus that are, in different cultures because, we have different
Yes.
languages, different
Sure.
names, but it is the same story that is very similar.
Mhm.
So it may be like that. But also, Enoch was very into astronomy. In the book of Enoch, there are a few book of Enochs, but
Yes.
I'm not that into, the
Yes, of
specifics, but
course.
at least in the one book of Enoch, there are very specific mentions of astronomical details. And
Yes.
our ancient ancestors were really into astronomy, were actually like astronomical fanatics. And Thoth was also mentioned to be like the measurer of the earth. There is one of his like subnames that Thoth is the measurer of the earth, that he measures the sky, that Thoth is concerned with the movement of the planets and all of the stars. So there are some like not direct but indirect similarities to the two of those people. And
Yes.
we have here an advanced astronomical and geographical knowledge, because in the book of Enoch there are described the celestial bodies and how they move. And our ancient ancestors also knew about like some advanced astronomical concepts like the previously mentioned precession of the equinoxes, those
Yes.
zodiacal epochs. They
Yes.
also knew about plenty of other stuff. So
Yes.
we have some advanced knowledge. And also, as I mentioned, I later investigated the ancient or even prehistorical measures of the earth. And this knowledge not only about the stars and the heavens, but also about exact dimensions of our planet and also its movement and its place in the solar system and in the universe. So
Right.
it is a lot of stuff. I won't go into details
Yes.
here, but it is
Yes.
a lot of stuff that is connected to all of those mythology and all of those like heroes of the ancient times that were connected to astronomy. And
Mhm.
all of that information is encoded, for instance, in the pyramids or in ancient texts, as you mentioned, other people on your like podcasts that are telling you about those connections to the precession and zodiacal ages. It is
Mhm.
all encoded. And another thing about Thoth and Enoch is that Thoth, according to urban chroniclers, was supposed to encode all of the information in the Great Pyramid because there was to be a great deluge, a great cataclysm. So here we find the dimensions of the earth and the knowledge about our planet in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And we
Mhm.
have even a legend, a story, ancient story about thought encoding that knowledge in the Great Pyramid of Giza. So we have plenty of coincidences, and we see that that knowledge existed. It was about the astronomy, but also geography. And
Yes.
then we have like anomalous maps like the Piraeus map, Oron's Finesse map, Mercator map, and plenty of other maps. Like Graham Hancock, I think, found about 20 or 30 of them that are showing different parts of the globe before the end of the Ice Age, before the 10,000 BC, before the fall of Atlantis. I think that it isn't coincidental. And also in my book, I found some other mentions from different parts of the globe that are pointing to a very similar date to Plato's Atlantis. Even like in the Tamil nation, there is a mention of previous Sangams that is only 100 years after the destruction of Plato's Atlantis. So I think that it isn't a coincidence, and it all points out to the end of the last ice age, which was very mysterious and which may be really catastrophic. Even nowadays in the mainstream, there are theories like Younger Dryas impact hypothesis about that catastrophe at the end of the last ice age, which coincides with the fall of Atlantis.
Right. Which would make complete sense, and it would coincide with a lot of even the continents that have gone missing.
Yes.
And I think
even with
no, go ahead.
Yes, even I think with the Eye of Sahara, because for instance, about like 9,000 years BC, the Mediterranean Ocean wasn't, the Mediterranean Sea wasn't a sea, but there were more lands in it. And also the Sahara was much more greenish, and there were plenty like of rains and stuff like that. And we have even the water erosion around the Great Sphinx at Giza. So it may point that it is much older, but also when it comes to the Eye of Sahara, who knows if at that time it wasn't a desert, but maybe some like, site like modern, let's say Greece or modern Mediterranean region. I think that it may be the case that at that time Sahara wasn't a desert, and we have some geological evidence for that, but not many, but there are some.
There are images of ships, old ships in the desert, and they're trying to figure out, I mean, okay, nothing I suppose a good tsunami couldn't take care of, but some of them are pretty far inland.
Yes, exactly.
So,
There were plenty of changes when it comes to our geology, when it comes to even like scientific data from about 20,000 years BC up until now, like 120 meters of sea levels rose up. 120 meters, so let's say that during the cataclysms or series of cataclysms at the end of the last ice age, it was like rapid, and maybe Atlantis or some other continents didn't sink in a day and a night, but it may be that during a single lifetime of a person, they saw where they were small that there was like a city or a civilization, and then 30 years later it is all gone. And even Plato is telling us that the site of Atlantis at his time, so in the ancient times of Greece, like 300 400 years BC, wasn't navigable, and that it was very muddy, that there were like all of that stuff from Atlantis went up, and that all of that sea wasn't to be, you couldn't go through that because it was mud and it was all of the stuff from Atlantis. So it may be that it was really the case. We see that the water levels were really rising a lot. We see that some places that are now like Sahara were previously very green. We see that other places that are now green before were inhospitable. So there were a lot of changes when it comes to the end of the last ice age.
Right. I agree. Let's talk about pyramids. Why pyramids? They're everywhere. They're all over the world. Many different cultures were building these amazing structures. Like I I know you know. A lot of people don't know,
Mhm.
so I would like. So let's
Yes.
enlighten people.
So, of course, all of the debunkers and skeptics will say that that there are pyramids all over the world because it is a simplest thing to build. Because if you want something high, if you build a tower that has straight edges, straight walls,
Mhm.
it would very easily collapse, and it would be much harder to build with primitive tools. So
Mhm.
what is logical is just, as when you get like some sand or some gravel, it goes into a cone or a pyramid. So the bunkers and skeptics will say that it is natural to build pyramids because it is much easier, and
Mhm.
they are not collapsing that much because they go like that. But there are much more similarities than only the shape of the pyramid,
Right.
because in, I think, the 6th chapter of my book, I not only show you like a single coincidence and similarity between many of the pyramids from total different continents, but I
Mhm.
show you much more of them. Because, for instance, we've got the three like most famous pyramids of Giza, like the
Yeah.
pyramids of
I've
Khufu,
been.
Khafra, and
Yeah.
Menkaure. Yes.
It's pretty
And
impressive.
I haven't been to them, but they look very impressive.
Right.
And we have also the same alignment, which may be to the Orion Belt, which was actually very important when it comes to the ancient Egyptian mythology, because it was believed that the soul or your part essence, because though it was much more complicated, there were a few like things, there was Kaaba, but a part of you after your death and after you were put in the pyramid went straight to the Orion Belt, which
Mhm.
consists of three stars aligned exactly the same as the pyramids in Giza.
Mhm.
So it isn't a coincidence, most probably, of course. And then we have the same alignment in Mexico, in
Mhm.
Teotihuacan, three pyramids. Again, the same alignment to the Orion Belt. And
Mhm.
again, when it comes to that alignment, we can say that, these are three pyramids, so they were
Right.
placed randomly. But
Right.
even the same like sizes of those pyramids are placed according to the Giza plan. So the
Right.
same plan for the Orion at Giza and the same plan in Teotihuacan in Mexico. It's also very interesting because we do not know much about the beliefs of the people of Teotihuacan, but we know, for instance, about very similar beliefs of Native Americans to ancient Egyptians. They also believed that at the Orion Belt there was some kind of portal, and you was going down there after your death or after out of body experience.
Mm.
So it may be that it is under connection, but we do not know much about the beliefs of ancient people of ancient Mexico, but they
Mhm.
are very close to the Native Americans, so it may be the case.
Mhm.
But then we have another thing, because the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the biggest one, is the same as the base of the biggest pyramid of the sun at Teotihuacan. And I think that it is beyond a coincidence, because we have, two different variables here. It isn't
Right.
like, one random thing and one random thing. We have two variables here.
Right.
And also we have the pyramids in Xi'an in China, which are
Mhm.
also placed free like the Orion Belt. And here
Mhm.
we've got Mexico, here we've got Egypt, and here we've got
Right.
China. And
Right.
some even people say that those three sides are also aligned to the Orion, like Mexico, like
Mhm.
Egypt in the middle, and then China a little bit above. So it may
Right.
be another thing, but I don't think it is that precise as the alignment of the pyramids themselves. So we
Right.
have plenty of those similarities that are beyond a mere coincidence. I don't
Right.
believe in that, because we have different places and a few variables.
Right.
But it isn't only about the pyramids, because there are also some myths and legends that are similar also from all around the world. I
Right.
actually found, when it comes to the catastrophe of the end of the last ice age, I found myths from Native Americans. I think it was Eureka's people. I think it is spelled you say Euricus, I don't know, but Irokesi in Poland, it is Eureka's people of Native America,
Right.
the Scandinavian lore, and the Indian Rig Veda. also we've got Scandinavia, America, and India, and in all those places we have myths of the end of the last ice age, because in 3 of those legends, myths, or texts, depending on the site, we have a mention of like a giant monster, giant frog, or giant dragon that has all of the waters inside of him. And we have a mention of some kind of hero that is destroying by some flaming arrow or by rays of sun, is destroying this monster, and from that monster the waters came and the great flood happens. So it is a very interesting story, and it may be that there was some kind of comet or asteroid that hit the earth and led to the melting of the glaciers and the great deluge or something like that. So we have plenty of different similarities between ancient cultures that were totally isolated from each other.
Right. Do you think that a lot of these ancient structures, including the pyramids, but there's a lot of other ancient structures that have been built, do you think that our ancestors were capable of moving such huge stones?
Yes, it is very interesting because, it isn't beyond a possibility that you cannot move any stone. I think that if you want, you can move a stone, but it is about the amount of stones that were placed in a single place, like the Great Pyramid of Giza, that is beyond any possibility. Because I think that, if you want, if you have plenty of people, you can move a stone. But, in the Great Pyramid, there are some stones that are very above the pyramid, in the upper parts of the pyramid, that weigh about 70 tons and that are very precisely put to actually make the pyramid not fall down, not make fall inside of the top. So it is very hard to actually have 70-ton block and move it in that way. So it is hard, but also the amount of blocks in the Great Pyramid of Giza put in 10 or 20 years, as modern historians are telling us, is, I think, beyond possibility to just go and, get some people or some oxen maybe and put and place in those sites.
It would take you longer to build a ramp, if that's the theory that you're going with.
Or, you can build a ramp, or you can go from like inside. There are many theories.
But it would take longer to build the mechanism to raise these things, I would think.
Yes, I even made like a mind experiment. Like, imagine having all of the blocks cut and all of the blocks like nearby the site in which you build the pyramid. Imagine. And I when you go for the calculations, and the pyramid, there are about 2.3 million stone blocks, you would need to put a block every about 4 to 9 minutes. I made all the calculations in my book. So imagine, having all of these stones cut in place, and you have to place in the right place, of course, a block every 4 to 9 minutes. So it is very hard, but imagine also that you have to take some time to transport the blocks and take some time to cut those blocks. The pyramid wasn't built in 20 years. If it was built by those primitive techniques, it would take like 80 or 100 or even more years.
It's not like you could just move these blocks either once they're in place. So if you don't get it very precise in cutting with measurements and placing, you can't just, let's just pick this up and reposition it. Like, it's very, very precise. And some of these other pyramids throughout the world, it's the same thing. It's the same idea.
But in some different pyramids, like the other pyramids in Egypt, there isn't that much precision.
No.
Some even of those pyramids are collapsing.
There's hundreds of pyramids in Egypt. So, no, that's just one example. I mean, all over the world, they're finding pyramids. I mean, the pyramid that they have in Russia, they believe is the actual cradle of civilization. They truly believe that was the cradle of civilization. And yet, I mean, Egypt will say it was them. South Africa will say it was them. I mean, there's phenomenal, these things are popping up all over the place. But the one that fascinates me, of course, the most, and from what I understand, Göbekli Tepe, there's there's others, like they just found another one like it, but apparently
Yes.
I had a researcher on this, says there's like 8 of these
Hmm.
locations. The curious part about that to me is why they buried it.
Hmm. Yes, but I don't know much about the specifics of those sites, but who knows
Yeah.
if they buried it intentionally or if those sites were maybe buried because there were some like floods or some, mud water, and it was like that.
With
And because of
technology?
those, waters,
Yeah.
that mud all came and
Yeah.
like buried it. We do not know much about that, but it may be that it was buried intentionally also. It is like
Mhm.
initial hypothesis that
That's
people
what I
from that.
think. Yes.
Mhm.
And it
Yes.
would be, hiding their technology, because I can't
Hmm.
understand why
Or
anybody would wanna
knowledge.
hide their history.
Hmm. Yes, or hide knowledge. Like, as I
Yes.
mentioned, the pyramid, according to the Arab chroniclers, who were taking like the lore from the medieval Egypt, and that lore could be even ancient, we do not know, were
Mhm.
telling that the pyramid was built by a mythical king Surid or Thoth. They identified those people together about
Mhm.
300 years before the Great Flood, because Thoth had a prophetic dream that in 300 years there will be a great flood. And it is very interesting because, as I mentioned, the modern historians are telling that the pyramid was built in between 10 to 20 years,
Yes.
but here in those legends it is mentioned that 300 years before flood. So it may have taken them 100 years or even 200 years, and it would be
Right.
more realistic actually.
Right.
And in that lore there is a mention that it was in order to hide knowledge and artifacts for future generation, in order to preserve them. A similar thing to, for instance, a Zoroastrian mention of Yima, who is taking seeds into a bunker because there would be some kind of catastrophe, or
Right.
like Noah is taking animals and people into his ark. So we
Mhm.
have like an archetype or a type
Yes.
of like having a catastrophe, and we need to preserve knowledge. And who knows, if the pyramids were to preserve knowledge inside, maybe the Göbekli Tepe was like built, but then if there was a flood, so maybe they
Mm.
buried it in order to preserve it.
To preserve it. Yeah,
Yes.
which would make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I totally forgot where I was going next, but it was good. I just had a bit of a brain moment. Um, oh, great. We'll
No
just keep
problem.
going. Yeah, it'll come back to me. Um, yeah, it'll come back to me.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just continue on. Um, God, it was right there at the tip. But okay, so where do you want to take it? And
So
hopefully it'll
maybe
just
let's
come
go
back.
with the flat,
Uh,
because we were talking about the similarities in mythologies, in ancient texts, and in the pyramids, but there are also similarities between the flat stories, and these
yes,
similarities
yes,
are huge,
yes.
because when it comes to the most famous, like Noah's Ark, in that
Hmm.
story we have
Right.
Noah, the main hero, who
Yes.
takes onto his ark also three of his sons,
Hmm.
his wife, and three wives of his sons.
Hmm.
Of three wives of his sons. So there is Noah, the main hero, and seven other people onto the
Right.
ark, and the rest are the animals.
Hmm.
But the same thing is, for instance, in the Hindu mythology. We
Right.
have here not Noah, we have Manu, also the main hero, and we have seven rishis, seven sages, but also seven people. So
Hmm.
even numbers of people taken onto the ark are the same in all of those stories. And it
Hmm.
may be that these stories are connected to the stories of teachers of mankind, who were
Hmm.
also often depicted as seven people. For instance, in the Mesopotamian lore, there are seven Apkallus, also seven sages,
Right.
like seven rishis in India.
Hmm.
But on the head of the seven Apkallus is a person called Oannes. And
Hmm.
that person is depicted in the fish robe. And it is mentioned that he came from water.
Right.
And the same depiction we can find in the Mayan mythology. And in the
Hmm.
Mayan mythology, we have Uanna, like oannes, uanna. These are very similar. If you write it down, it would be clear that they are similar. But they are similar, and in Mayan mythology, uanna means he who has his home in the water.
Right.
So here we've got a person in the rope of a fish, depicted like a fish, half man, half fish, who comes from water and has almost the same name as in the Mayan mythology, who also has his home in water. So here we've got plenty of like, these are not like direct, and every aspect of that isn't the same, but here we've got one thing that connects, here we've got another, and we can have like an entire map, an entire big picture of how it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting how all of these cultures throughout the world, who we assume don't connect, all have the same stories. Where I was going now came back to me is the ancient Sumerian kings, who, if you look at the ancient Sumerian king list, it goes back to 450,000 years with only like, what was it, four kings that went something like 250,000 of those years. So you're either a whole other, advanced species that can really master the art of longevity, or we just, automatically, we just had, we lived much longer. Obviously, like even Noah was said to live, 800 years, something along those lines. And was it his grandfather Methuselah who went even? So, if that being the case, you could see how history and oral history would just keep playing out, because we were just around so much longer. Now we can barely keep a thought in our heads, and I think that we maybe don't put as much emphasis on ancient history, which is so important. We're just been conditioned to believe certain things. So if history repeats itself, and we've had these natural disasters, why don't we finish off with that? Do you think that we have another? Because scientists believe that we have something cataclysmic coming. So what do you think of that theory? And if so, what do you think it is?
It may be cyclical, but also you mentioned that longevity, and there is now a movement like biohacking and stuff like that, and also scientists that believe that we can live up to 300 years or 600 years if we eat properly.
Right.
And even our DNA enables us to do that. We age because our DNA is shortening. We have chromosomes in our DNA, and the end of those chromosomes are called telomeres. And telomeres are like shoelaces. At the end of a shoelace, we've got like a plastic or a metal that is having it together, in order not to, a casual shoelace would go in every direction because it is made of smaller pieces. And the same are telomeres. They are holding our DNA in order for it to be preserved. But those telomeres are shortening as we age. And even it is, of course, only hypothesis that when those telomeres end, we know that those cells, because in every cells we've got DNA and telomeres and chromosomes, and when that telomere is like being destroyed totally, shortens to the end, that like cell without that telomere becomes like cancer cell or is automatically destroyed. And scientists believe that if we had if we could actually make those telomeres not shorten, or even elongate them, and we know that we can elongate those telomeres if we, for instance, reduce stress and stuff like that. And we know that stress, bad eating, and like some pollution from the air and water can shorten those telomeres. We know a lot about them.
We need to live a calmer life, meditation.
Yes,
everything,
exactly.
proper diet.
Yes, and that's why stress, or not only stress, makes you age faster. And it is not only because of the oxidation and all of the stress and hormones, but also because of the telomeres, and your like cells are aging themselves, not only you as a whole, but also cells. And if we could like prolong those telomeres or keep them together,
Mhm.
our cells wouldn't age that much and wouldn't like become destroyed. And we
Right.
know, for instance, that we can have, there are like stem cells that can be made into another cell and they can
Mhm.
make them younger.
Right.
So we have like some ideas of how to make
Mhm.
such long spans of our lives by
Mhm.
like keeping or elongating those telomeres. So we have
Right.
a DNA potential for longevity for like 150 years or 200 or 300, maybe not more, but we
Mhm.
have that potential. But why our diets, our living habits, and
Mhm.
the way we exist makes us that those telomeres are shortening. It's
Right.
very interesting, and maybe into some conspiracy theory that we
Yes.
had some source of food in the past, in those years before the flood, or we were living differently, that we were
Yes.
able to keep that long spans of lives, or maybe we had the
Well,
technology to do that.
well, we certainly didn't have things like chemtrails and microwaves and things like that. I
Yes.
mean, that do affect us in a physical way, but that's all part of technology. So
Hmm.
we can't have it both ways, obviously. At least not with the type of technology that is used, nowadays. If you want your cell phone, well, you're going to need those towers. This is all stuff that's
Hmm.
put out into the environment. So we're going to put up your book, and as we're coming towards the end of the show, where can we get your book? How can people communicate
Hmm.
with you?
Yes, my book is available on the Amazon in a lot of regions, like in Europe, Australia, UK, USA. On every Amazon, almost on every Amazon, you can
Yeah.
find it. It is Deja Vu, has everything already been. You can type my name or surname, and it should pop out. And when
Right.
it comes to my like to contact me, I have a web page. But you won't remember it because you probably won't remember my surname.
I'll make sure that it's
Yes.
in the show write up.
Yes, I will send you a link. It is czeszkiewiczglobal.com. And I also have like a YouTube channel and Facebook page. It is all my name and surname. On YouTube, it is Aleksander Czeszkiewicz Global, because I have also a Polish channel because I'm from Poland.
Right.
So you just type my surname. I am also on Instagram, on TikTok, I think, but I don't use that, and many other social media.
I'll make sure that everything you've sent me gets put up in the
I
show
will
write
send
up
you,
so
yes.
somebody can click on it. Yeah, I've got some. I just want to make sure I've got the website and everything
Okay.
else. And we'll make sure this way. All you guys have to do is click on the link and it will take you right down
Yes, yes.
Alexander's contact information and where to pick up this amazing book, which was just fantastic, I have to say.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been really delightful, very informative. It's always nice to communicate with someone of like mind and be able to bounce ideas around and look at different, look at a hypothesis and really dissect it, so to say. But I really hope that you write another book. I would really
I
hope you
have
do.
plenty of ideas, but I don't know which one to put first.
Well, I
This
think you
is the
should.
problem.
I if you could write a book at 17 like this and do it in a year, I think that you can master anything you do. The research is phenomenal, and I would read anything that you put out there because it is well researched and it is really, really well put together.
Thank you very much. I also really enjoyed. It was very insightful and very like engaging conversation.
Thank you. And this is what I try to make it look like. It's a conversation. I don't like to just be
Yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
that drill sergeant and put out
Yes,
all these
yes.
questions. I like to give you as much time as possible to really get it all out there. So thank you. So everybody, obviously, we are at the end of our show, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it, listening to it as much as I enjoyed putting it together. That's for sure. Um, I am. Hold on. I wanted to get something else out here. Where is it? Where is it? All right, look at me. I'm just having a day because it really is a day for me early. But guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring the show. Thank you all for tuning in to the United Public Radio Network. You guys will be able to find all of these archives on over 200 different streaming sites. Of course, the one that we do the best on is SoundCloud and Google Podcasts, Apple, those sort of things. So we are an FM station. Remember that. So the audio archives will be the strongest. So again, big thank you to Folgers Coffee. Big thank you to Alexander. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you too.
Thank you to Dr. Snick. Thank you to Steve McGinnis. We appreciate you all so very much. When you guys tune in tomorrow night, please look for Mark Dawidziak, who's going to be discussing the life of Edgar Allan Poe. So this, of course, is coming right into what they call spooky month, being October. So after tonight's show, which is a nice intellectual, make you think sort of show, when you're having a déjà vu, think about where it's coming from. So behave. We'll see you all tomorrow evening. Good night.